Hello and welcome to Bosch Technology Talks. Joining us. My name is Ann Insero and I'll be the moderator for this. Today, Jim Kasparek, Regional Marketing Manager for Fixed Cameras, will be presenting on Simplified with the use of fixed PTRZ cameras. Before I turn it over, we'll go over a few logistics. All audience lines have been muted to ensure quality audio, and we're recording this and we'll post it online to our webinar registration page for viewing later. We'll take questions today via Slido. To use Slido, open a browser on your computer or mobile phone and type sli.do in the address bar and hit enter. You should see the screen pictured on the left. Enter the event code K591 to see the screen pictured on the right. Type your question in the box and hit ask. You can ask your questions anonymously or enter your name. By entering your first and last name, we'll be able to respond to you personally if we do not have time to address all questions. You can ask questions at any time throughout the presentation, and we'll answer them at the end during our Q&A portion. With that, I'll turn it over to Jim to begin our presentation.
I want to thank everybody for joining the presentation and wanting to understand how to use the 8000i and being able to simplify installations through the use of a fixed PTRZ camera. So just a little bit of overview for the 8000i. It's a new family of mini domes that Bosch introduced last year. And some of the unique characteristics of the 8000i is it has a small footprint. It has a very robust housing. It has the ability for temperature capabilities from negative 58 degrees Fahrenheit up to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Plus it has special coatings on it for, say, in high SO2 environments or sea salt for, talking for tunnels and or for ports, for seaside or for ocean applications. And then you look at, for ruggedization. You have your IK10. The camera itself is IK10 plus, and it's rated for the entire camera, not just the enclosure, but it's an entire rating for the entire camera. So functionality all the way up to IK10. Some of the other unique capabilities of the camera. One is the integrated IVA at the edge, integrated video analytics, up with also our machine learning, or what we refer to as our camera trainer. You have flavors for this camera from a 1080p all the way up to a 4K. We'll discuss that a little more in a second. And some of the unique characteristics, one is it has a built-in wireless access point. This access point can be utilized for the commissioning of the product. And when we talk about commissioning, we're talking specifically about being able to set up the field of view and being able to do all of the core programming of the camera, from the frame rate, resolution, things like that, the IP address, passwords. It includes our core functionality for our data security, and then also dual SD cards. So you have the ability with 2 SD cards at the edge to store up to 1 terabyte per card at the edge. It has some additional characteristics which we'll roll into a little bit later. And then last but not least is the PTRZ function of the camera. Yes, this is considered a fixed camera, but it has the ability to do your pan, tilt, roll, and zoom without ever having to put hands on the camera itself. It has a full 361-degree pan, so there is no blind spots in the camera. When it comes to talk about the ease of installation, or the characteristics, you have your high resolution, which is what Bosch is known for as our imaging quality. So you have your resolution from a 1080p, a 6 megapixel, and up to 4K. And everything in from a 3 to 10 millimeter lens up to a telephoto. And then our starlight technology, so that low light technology, all the way up into our 4K camera. Wide dynamic range up to 134 dB. This is great for building entrances or the entrances, exits of a tunnel, remote locations, etc. And up to 60 frames per second, which is great for your ITS, your traffic space. Some of the unique characteristics that we'll cover in this presentation is the simplified install. The biggest part of that is there's only 3 pieces to the camera itself, which we'll follow over next, but there's only 3 parts to the camera. It helps expedite the installation, and because of the installation characteristics, it helps you maximize resources by utilizing maybe different assets and resources for the installation of the camera itself. And the other key is you only touch the camera one time. So the second the camera is hung, that's the last time you're intended to have to touch the camera. Commissioning, and again, when we talk about commissioning, we're talking about getting your field of view. We're talking about setting the basic characteristics into the camera, your frame rate, your resolution, IP address, naming of the camera, and the IP address. This can be done with no VMS, no additional hardware software, and this will expedite completion. If I can do all of this, the field of view, setting up all of your basics in the camera, I can do all of this remotely, locally, with no VMS, no actually any additional software in it, specifically before the VMS is even on site. This form factor and this technology will also allow you to rapidly address customer changes. For instance, if I am capable of remotely changing the field of view, if I have customers that occasionally have their floor space or the architecture of their building change and they want different fields of view. Maybe they moved a teller station, maybe it's in a retail and they moved an aisle. They want to look at a different location in a bank for this, whatever. It allows you to address their changing environment and their concerns in a much more rapid pace. Instead of saying I can be out there in a week and I need to get a lift, I can actually now address it remotely or the same day with one person and be able to get the field of view, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So no lifts for a field of view change. It's going to minimize labor because I don't have to send 2-3 people out there, and it minimizes the impact, and this is the big one, it minimizes the impact on the customer's environment because I'm not having to bring a lift in, a ladder, and I'm not having to bring any additional resources and disrupt their business space. So when it comes to the installation portion of it, the camera consists of 3 parts, and only 3 parts. You have the mounting plate. I refer to that as engineered Swiss cheese. So you have the mounting capability to fit all of the typical gang boxes that are out there, from single gang, double gang, octagon, 4S, all built into the plate. It also has some innate cable management inside of the base plate itself. Then the second part is the camera base. It's a mechanical transfer plate. Basically, this is where all of my IOs connect into. It has a special IP66 grommet. That's a patent pending grommet for the base. You pull the Ethernet through, you pull through all of your IO contacts, you put the grommet in place, and then the base of the camera itself, or the base of the camera, just twists on to the mounting plate and just snaps into place. And then you have the camera body. The camera body is a sealed camera body. This helps in so many different aspects because I don't have to worry about the technician taking the camera apart. You have the exposed camera body. Did they put their fingers on the lens? Did they try to mechanically move the gimbal? Did they break something? Did it, oops, out of the box have issues? So to prevent things like that and to protect the camera body, it's a sealed camera body. And then with that, there's just 4 screws. So at this point, we're looking at a total of 8 screws to secure that camera to the mounting, to the wall, or to its mounts. And then after the camera's been mounted, traditionally, boom, we're done, and then we'll traditionally send somebody else back. Maybe a couple days later, maybe when we have 2 people. Sometimes it's the same time, but at that point we have to now focus, get the field of view of the camera. And now that can be done a couple different ways. In the older cameras, you actually were a completely manual setup. You had to focus it, you had to move it, you had to do everything right there at the bubble. That was fun, considering once you think you got it focused and you put the bubble on it, that's a whole new lens, and now you got to kind of tweak it and figure out to get the best image possible. That's difficult. Then we go to AVF lenses. Now, getting the field of view makes it a little bit easier. You're probably using 1 to 2 people, or you've got a couple things on top of a ladder and you're trying to hold a monitor, you're doing something like that. But then after you get the field of view, then when you put the lens on, hey, I can still remotely focus and get that sharp picture. So that was a big improvement. Now with the 8000i, with remote commissioning, now we can skip that step altogether. So that really helps expedite that. So once he mounts the camera, once that camera has power, I now have the ability to commission that camera. It can be commissioned a couple of different ways, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But notice again, I'm not having to put hands on it since I initially installed it. And so now for, a poll question. Let's see. So just from a question, utilizing an 8000, utilizing a camera that you have to touch only one time. I don't need any additional lifts. I don't need a ladder. I don't have to come back a second or third time to get it. What kind of time do you think this is going to save you overall? Okay, it seems that some people may have actually seen the presentation before, or we'll talk about the big picture here in a second on the next slide. Let's go ahead and right now it looks like everybody's up to 75%. So let's take a look at, let's go forward and see exactly what that may look like. So today, with, we'll say a traditional camera, non-PTRZ camera, once the camera is installed physically, a lot of individuals will do this because you have your milestone or your step payments and you want to finish projects in a certain way. I pull my cable, I hang my camera, and then after the camera's hung, that's a step, and then after that, then we send somebody back, and then that person goes back, and that person is going to get the field of view. And traditionally, the person that hung the camera and the person that pulled the cable and the person that's getting the field of view, those are usually different assets or resources within an organization, or they could be a contract resource. With this, using the 8000i and this technology, the camera is very easy to mount and install. So traditionally, the guy that's pulling your cable would theoretically be able to mount the camera, because remember, he doesn't touch anything. He puts in 4 screws to mount the plate, pulls the cable through, plugs it into the base, and then 4 more screws to hang the camera, and that's all he does. So, but commissioning today in a traditional camera, they're looking at, and after the camera's been hung, they come back. And when they come back, they physically have to touch that camera. So they're bringing a ladder, and then they're bringing a lift. And then there's probably either the guys on the lift or on the ladder using a dongle, using some other asset, and then using a monitor, something else, and then trying to get the field of view of the camera. Or, as you can see in the second image, which is usually a little more accurate, you have 2 people. You have the guy on the lift, the ladder, you have him on a phone or a radio, and he's talking to somebody on a VMS or at a head end saying, move a little bit to the left, a little bit up. Just rotate a little bit, clockwise. Let's get the proper field of view. That can take a significant amount of time. Either one of those can take a significant amount of time. And also at this point, they're also touching the camera again. They've pulled the protective dome off of it. They're touching the camera. They're exposing it. So it leads to, more chances for error is what this provides the ability for. So let's take a look at a different way. Let's talk about using the 8000i and the PTRZ functionality within the camera. So now the camera's been installed. It physically installs quicker. There's 3 pieces, fewer things to get confused, much easier way to install. But now we're coming back. This can be done the same day. This can be done a week later. But we're coming back to commission the cameras. Again, get the field of view, set the basic information in the camera, doing all of the stuff, again, before the VMS is even available. Because we know the VMS traditionally comes in towards the end. because then once you get the VMS there, you're trying to get it set up, you're programming, then you reach out to the cameras and you get all the programming. What if you could actually expedite that? Utilizing the wireless access point in the camera and using one of our apps, because we have an app for this specifically for the 8000i and for all of our cameras. But now with the 8000i, I can connect to the camera viewing the wireless access point in the camera itself, using my phone or using any kind of mobile device, anything with integrated Wi-Fi in it. Connect to the camera, change the settings, and manipulate the field of view without touching the camera. Or if I want to sit in a nice air-conditioned room, I can take my laptop, I can actually plug it into the network. No VMS, by the way. Just plug it into the network, utilizing our tool. You can scan the network, and using Project Assistant, you can find the cameras. You connect to the camera, you push the settings to it, or you can make the settings in it, but then I adjust the field of view. This is with no VMS. This is just simple power to the camera. And now I set my field of view. I set all the basic settings in the camera, from the password, the IP address, the name, the frame rate, all of that stuff is done. But this is without a VMS. So now I can get the physical part of the camera, the installation, the field of view, I can get all of that done up to 75% faster, utilizing fewer resources. If I traditionally rent a lift for 3 weeks, maybe I'm down to 1 week. Maybe if I have 3 to 4 man hours per camera for the installation, now maybe I'm down to an hour and a half, which is everything. Installing it, commissioning it, everything. So with all this greatly expedites the installation process. Now one of the things, let's go ahead and talk about the tool or some of the other functionality of the PTRZ. So this is a short video just showing the PTRZ capability within the app. This shows we're connecting to it. We're going to do it wirelessly in this setup. We're going to use the QR code that comes with all of the cameras. And now we're creating an ad hoc connection directly to a secure ad hoc connection to that camera. Now we're going to put in the password for it. We're giving it a simple name. We could change the IP address here if we want, but here we're going to go ahead and we're going to set the field of view. Setting the field of view here is where it is supposed to be made very simple, and we can do it 3 different ways. Moving the camera and getting the field of view can be done a couple different ways, and we'll talk about each one of them. In this one, we're just going to have doing some more of the basic core settings. Now we go to alignment, and we're just going to click the mouse or our finger in the image, and the image is going to move and center where we selected in the image. And now we want to tell the camera, we're in an alley. We want referred to as corridor view or upright mode in Bosch. Again, I'm just going to click right there in the center. The camera is going to align itself. So it has a MEM sensor, a gyro sensor in the camera, and the camera can sense how it's mounted. Is it mounted horizontally, vertically, 30 degrees? It can actually sense how it's mounted. And now I want a tighter view. So I'm actually going to draw a box in the image. And now the camera is going to zoom in on the field of view that I wanted. So by doing this, we're able to get the field of view 3 different ways. We're able just to take a mouse and click in the image. The camera moves and centers on where we clicked. I can then draw a box around. If I want to really tighten the image better, I can draw a box around the target that we want, and the camera will pan, it'll tilt, and it'll roll to match the box that we actually drew, and it'll zoom in. And then the other way, which we don't show here, is you have the ability to use radio buttons. So if I want to tune it, really tune it. So if you have a really specific application in a counting cage, in a bank, on a gaming floor, something like that, and you need it to be at a certain angle, at a certain settings, you can actually go in there and adjust the pan, tilt, roll mechanically in there by pushing the button. By doing so, you can adjust it at 1/2 of a degree per push. So you can get pretty accurate in how you set this camera. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to finalize the camera by just telling it how high off the ground it is. And then at the end, when you are done with the camera, you have the ability to disable the Wi-Fi in the camera. So you can enable the Wi-Fi and you can disable it, and we also have other options for it as well. It's like completely disable it. So with that, that was 2 minutes. 2 minutes to get your field of view and do all the core programming necessary in the camera. It was actually just a little under 2 minutes. And if you contrast that to using a traditional camera, where you have now 2 people doing it and they touch the camera 2 to 3 times, this is a significant savings altogether in just a simple commissioning of the camera. So now for an additional poll question. After the initial setup, just out of curiosity, of setting up, that can I actually adjust the field of view after the fact? So we've got a couple responses here, and everybody's kind of guessing the same. Oops, let's make sure I can show you what you're actually doing. So there you go. Now you can probably see the results. So everybody, yes. So yes, after the initial installation, the field of view can be changed. The field of view can be changed multiple different ways. And let me go ahead and go back to the presentation. So the field of view, let me see if I go. So the field of view can be adjusted a couple of different ways. Through the wireless access point in the camera, use a mobile device, via Ethernet with my laptop, whatever, using the web browser, or utilizing Project Assistant, a free app from Bosch that runs on both your mobile devices or on a Windows machine. The one thing that this is not, it's not a PTZ camera, so it's not meant to be moved like a PTZ. This is meant to simplify and expedite the installation of the camera. So it's not necessarily available through the VMS. It's available through the installer tools. So if can you adjust the PTRZ of the camera through your VMS? The answer is yes and no. If the VMS through the installer tools allows you access to the browser of the camera, which honestly most do, then yes, you can go in and you can adjust the camera's field of view through that. Again, this is not meant to be a day-to-day thing. We're changing it all the time. This is meant to simplify the installation, expedite the process, and give you the ability to address the changes of the customer's requirements more rapidly. But that being said, it is capable of over, I believe it is 3,500 or 4,500 commissionings, and that's complete cyclings of the camera, not just movements, but complete cyclings of the camera. So some of the key takeaways: installation, touch the camera only one time. I can't say how valuable that is. That's an extremely valuable option. Commissioning it, it's a PTRZ. You don't need a ladder. You don't need a lift. You don't need a second or third person or a second or third visit to touch the camera. You have Ethernet connectivity, you have Wi-Fi connectivity, and no VMS is needed to get your field of view or to do all the base component programming of the camera. And on top of that, it's going to lead to customer retention. So if the customer needs the project done quickly, this allows you to use different resources and assets within an organization to get the job done faster and potentially get out of the way of other trades or minimize the impact on their working space. And on top of that, it allows you to address the changes in their environment as they happen. Instead of having to wait a week until you get a lift and after hours, this allows you to say, I can get somebody out there today or tomorrow with minimal impact during normal business hours. And that being said, this is what I hope you got something out of the presentation, and we'll go ahead and we'll open it up for questions.
Well, thank you, Jim. So like Jim said, now we'll answer questions for the next 10 minutes. As a reminder, please submit your questions using Slido. To use Slido, open a browser on your computer or mobile phone and type sli.do in the address bar and hit enter. You should see the screen pictured on the left. Enter the event code K591 to see the screen pictured on the right. Type your question in the box and hit ask. You can ask your questions anonymously or enter your name. By entering your name, we'll be able to respond to you personally if we don't have time to address all of the questions. Our first question today is, with the FLEXIDOME 8000i's dual SD cards, can they be used for redundancy for each other?
Yes, that's something we get asked quite often. So the SD cards themselves can support up to 1 terabyte each using industrial protocol. So this actually eliminates some of the concern about using storage at the edge. With industrial protocol, that gives us health monitoring of the card, letting us know if there's any read-write response delays. It also gives us the ability to do a couple different things to be able to notify if there's degradation in the card. You find out beforehand, not when you're trying to go back and retrieve video. But for the redundancy question, it provides a couple different things. So you can do dual recording. I can say I want to record to both cards at the same time. I can do spanning. So if I want, if I have 2 1 terabyte cards, I can have 2 terabytes of storage at the edge. So just basically like a box of disks. Or I can do failover. So I can say I'm recording to card number 1, and if anything happens, it reduces its write speed, bad sectors, or the card fails, the camera will then turn around and then go to card number 2 and start recording on card number 2, and then notify the VMS, send an email out, send an SNMP trap, letting it know that there's now a problem with card number 1. So there's a couple different options from dual recording, spanning, and as a failover option.
Our next question is the Project Assistant app only used for the FLEXIDOME 8000i cameras or other Bosch cameras as well?
So that's a good question. The Project Assistant app works with all of our cameras, and I believe it's with firmware 6.0 or higher. The difference between using Project Assistant with the 8000 versus the rest of our cameras is that with the 8000i, you have the ability for the PTRZ functionality to get the field of view. But all the other function capabilities of Project Assistant are available with the other cameras as well.
Next question, can you use the Wi-Fi to stream video to the VMS?
So the Wi-Fi in the camera, it's an ad hoc connection device to device, and it's used for setup and commissioning only. It is not used as a streaming tool. So you cannot use the Wi-Fi device to connect to a network to stream to a storage or a VMS. You also cannot use the wireless access point as a WAP in an installation to minimize the WAPs in a customer's installation. There is a firewall between the wireless access point, and there's actually physical separation between the wireless access point and the Ethernet. There's no bridging of the two.
Okay, and our last question today, what's the life expectancy of the motors that move the lens?
Life expectancy. So the motors that move the camera itself is rated for over 3,500 commissionings. So the life expectancy of that is if you're not moving it more than 3,500 times, then it falls under our mean time before failure, which is you're looking at over 20 years.
Great, thanks, Jim. That's all the time we have for today. We appreciate your attention and hope you'll tune into our future webinars. You can register at the link shown on the screen. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.